Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Corporate Governance. First of all, may I just say thanks for everyone who changed their diary. It was me that, in the first instance, had to change my diary for this evening. So, thanks for that. That's appreciated to everybody. Before we start, as well, just to mention that all communication is recorded. So, therefore, if you speak, please will you use the microphone. And bear in mind, everything is being recorded, so be careful what you say. If it's if you don't want it to be recorded, don't say it, in other words. So, do we have any apologies for absence, please?
There's no apologies been reported, but I don't think Councillor Davidson's going to appear.
Thank you. And Councillor McInnes is stepping in for Councillor Davis as Deputy Chairman for the evening. Do we have any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Then we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting dated the 20th of September 2008. Do we have any amendments, disagreements, comments on those minutes, please? Councillor Purdy-Horan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought it said in the minutes that we would expect more detail in budget monitoring this time. Did I read that correctly?
Is that one of the actions on the action list
I think
at the
so.
end? Let me just have a look. Yeah, would you like to comment on that?
Well, I mean, obviously we'll come on to that item, the revenue and capital report, but we have put some more explanation, more detailed explanations where applicable.
Okay. Any other points, questions, queries? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was going to make a comment about when we were talking at the last meeting about variances, adverse variances. But I see there's a mention about that on page 60 in the revenue variances, so I'll leave that over until later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we also had an email on the variances as well in the meantime. Is that correct?
No, the email was for, on the action sheet on page 4, there was an action regarding business continuity. So an email was sent out to all the members on business continuity in terms of what the low risk item was.
On item 14 on page 4, it starts on page 4 of the action sheet, there is mention of the revenue variance. Is that what you're referring to, Councillor? I think that's where we did receive an email, because did you not email out a list of the variances under 15k?
No, I think if you read the action, what we said was we would provide more information in this report, which we have done.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
It actually says to be included in the financial monitoring report to be at the next meeting,
which it is. I do remember reading it now. Yes. Okay. So that is there, right? So okay. Any other queries or points for clarification? So all those in favour to accept the minutes from the previous meeting? That's unanimous. I'll sign the minutes. Okay, we go on to the next item on the agenda, item number 4, which is introductions to Mazars, a verbal introduction from Anita Pipes, who's with us this evening. I'll introduce you to Anita on my right.
Hello everyone, I'm Anita Pipes and I'm the new audit manager and work for Mazars. I've just come along tonight really to give you a brief introduction to Mazars, to let you know a bit about the company, the team that are going to be working on the audit and a bit about the audit approach, and obviously happy to answer any questions afterwards that you may have. Firstly, apologies for not getting the presentation out to you earlier, so Peter's kindly going to scroll through and be my assistant while I talk you through it. And also apologies that David Hoos, the partner, couldn't be here tonight. He's got another commitment, but you'll see him at the next committee. So if we go on to page 1, please. I don't know if you can see that, but just to give you a bit of an idea about Mazars, because I'm sure probably some of you may not have heard of the firm before. It's actually a company that started in France, and it's really like one of the big 4 over in France and Germany, but it's a very global company now. As you can see, it's got a fee income of 1.5 billion euros. It works in over 86 countries and territories around the world in 300 locations, and there's 20,000 people employed, so it is a big company. In terms of the UK, we have 18 offices spread around the country. Myself and David are based in the Nottingham office. We've also got an office in Leicester and in Birmingham, and so staff will be used from those offices to work on this audit. And in the UK as well, we've got 135 partners and about just under 2,000 staff now as well. In terms of public sector experience, just to give you a bit of background, when the Audit Commission was disbanded in 2012, the North East team from the Audit Commission moved over to Mazars. So Mazars have been doing local government audits for the last 6 years, and the PSAA, who award the contracts, have been really happy with the quality of the work. So in the last tranche of audits that have just gone out to tender, Mazars have won audits in the East Midlands, 26 audit clients, including yourself, and also in the North West and in London. So it's a really big thing for the company, and we're really keen to work with you and to, hopefully you'll see this as a positive experience and we're coming in with a fresh pair of eyes to do your audit. So if we move on to the next page, so apologies, you probably can't see that very well. Just to give you a bit of background about the audit team, David Hoos is the engagement lead, and he is a partner in the Nottingham office, and he is a lead partner on education audits mainly, but he works across corporate clients, academies, further education colleges. He's got internal and external audit experience, and he will be your main contact at this group and oversee the audit. And he, can bring a lot of his background in commercial expertise, hopefully, which you will find beneficial as well. In terms of myself, I've got over 20 years audit experience as well. I started off at the Audit Commission and then I moved to KPMG, and I've just moved over to Mazars in September. So I've got the full breadth of external audit experience in local government, police, probation, health, housing. I've done it all really. So hopefully that will give you some assurance. In terms of the assistant manager, we've got Rob Palmer, who works in the Nottingham office, who'll be assisting on the team, and then we'll also bring in other colleagues from the Nottingham office as well to resource the audit, and hopefully we'll have continuity at the interim audit and the final accounts audit. And we've already had some meetings with Peter and the chief executive so far as well, and started to build those relationships. And as well, we've also got a team based up in Durham who provides specialist support. We've got John Lees, who's our technical director, and we've also got IT specialists and other specialists that you'd expect a large accountancy firm to have, which we can use on your audit if needed. So on the next page, it's just really a bit of background on the engagement responsibilities. Obviously, you're not going to see much difference to your previous auditors.
Excuse me, Chairman. Is it possible to increase the size of that so it's more readable? Have you not got a copy? Ah, right.
Yeah. Sorry. Well, hopefully it can be distributed maybe afterwards. Yeah. Well, that page is just basically giving an overview of what our responsibilities are. That will, in the circles down the left-hand side, it just says we've obviously got to give an audit opinion, as you'd expect and as your previous auditors did. We have to report to the NAO on your whole of government accounts. We have to provide a conclusion on your value for money, and the final one is electors' rights. So there's no difference. Obviously, we've got to follow the same accounting standards as the prior auditors, and so you won't see a difference in terms of what you get at the corporate governance group. We'll be sending an audit plan, and we'll obviously send our highlights report to you in July. So it will all be very similar to what you've received before. But hopefully, you know, we will be coming at it with a fresh pair of eyes. We're coming to this audit starting from afresh and looking at things in a totally new way, which hopefully will be beneficial. Finally, the last slide, I know you won't be able to see it, sorry. Again, that's just giving, the boxes at the bottom are just giving a timeline really of the audit. So in terms of planning, we're going to be doing our planning work on the audit in December to January, and we hope to get the audit plan out to you in February. Then moving on, we'll be doing the interim audit in February as well, and going through that. That is probably going to be a bit more time consuming this year, as it's the first year of the audit. So we'll be doing all the walkthroughs of the systems and looking at your controls. And if we find anything, then we'll provide a progress report to you at the next committee after we've concluded that work. Our field work on the final accounts audit will be in June. And again, we'll just go through the main, you know, it's a risk-based audit. We'll go through the risks that we identify as part of our planning. And I don't think they will be much different to KPMG's, to be honest. We'll be looking at fixed assets, pension liabilities, and obviously VFM risks in terms of like financial resilience at the council. And probably you're going down a more commercial route as well, looking at your investment strategy. So that it's not likely to be any different to what you've seen in the past. You'll get no surprises. And then finally, we'll do our completion in July and obviously bring our audit highlights report to you and our annual audit letter afterwards. Again, very similar to what you've experienced before. And that's it really. I just wanted to come out and meet you really and just give you a very brief run through of what we're doing, and I'm happy to take any questions if you've got any.
Thank you very much, Anita. Do we have any questions for Anita at this stage? It was more of an introduction rather than give her an in-depth grilling at this stage, but you may have some questions. Any questions? Councillor Purdy-Horan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering, do you cover town councils and parish councils? Because whoever does those external audits came in for heavy criticism this year when they weren't organised enough, and it put staff to a lot of stress as deadlines were approaching for statutory completions.
No, as part of the contract, we're just doing district councils, and we've got a county council. We don't do parish councils under the contract at all in anywhere in the country that we've got the audits.
Any other questions? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Just a comment, really. I mean, I've not heard of Mazars before. I assume that you're being employed by the council to do audit for us. Am I correct?
That's right, yeah. We have got the contract in the Midlands because the council went under the PSAA contract, which is the Public Sector Audit Appointments, I think that stands for. And so Mazars was awarded the contracts in the East Midlands. So yeah, we will be doing the audit as KPMG did it for you last year. For the next 5 years, we've got the contract.
If it's, sorry, just to carry on from that, I'd just like Peter just to make a comment how that contract is awarded, so that we're all understanding why that's happened.
Well, hopefully you will all recall, well, not all of you, Councillor Walker won't because he wasn't here, but there was a report that went to full council on the appointments process for using PSAA, which basically probably 99% of councils have done. I think there was a smuttering of maybe about 10 councils who decided not to for whatever reason. basically the idea was PSAA, effectively they're like what was the Audit Commission. So the Audit Commission were the ones that used to, if you like, divvy out the audits, and in the old days it used to be District Audit, in fact who I used to work for when I was a young lad. And District Audit,
A long time.
yeah, yeah. District Audit used to have about 70% of the audit work at the time, I think, but the government basically decided to, I don't know if you recall, they decided to disband, get rid of a lot of the quasi-public bodies, one of which was the Audit Commission. Personally, I don't think it was a bad decision, but that's my personal view, not the council's. But as a result of that, the PSAA effectively stepped in as the body to undertake the, if you like, the tender process on behalf of councils. So there was various lots awarded, as there was the first time around when KPMG won the contract for this part of the world. And unfortunately KPMG lost the contract, too expensive I think, probably. And Mazars were successful. Just by way of information, one piece of information you haven't got is there is a saving on the external audit fee, which by about £10,000, so it's gone down from 42,000 to 32,000. So, which is good news.
Thank you very much for that, Peter. And I think, from my own point of view, I think it's good to have fresh eyes every so often anyway. You know, my own business provide audit services, and every 3 years we change the auditor. So it's a completely different viewpoint. I know I've got other questions, but Councillor McInnes is next.
Yeah, thank you. You might have had time to do some research from previous reports. I just wonder whether you'd like to say what you thought about us.
Well, based on what I've read, obviously I've read the KPMG reports, and I've had planning meetings out here already, and I know that, you know, you're a good council, you have good level of reserves, you're a well-regarded council. I've had good feedback from the previous auditors because we have a handover meeting and we get to look at their files, and so yeah, I don't have any concerns, and I get good feedback, and I think you know, there shouldn't be any problems as a result.
I think we need to, right, we'll do one more question on this because we need to move on. Councillor Lawrence.
That's all right. You talk about fresh eyes on the subject. Unfortunately, I haven't got fresh eyes. And can I ask you to review your slides next time you come? Because you've just shown 4 completely unreadable slides.
Yeah, I apologise for that. It's because obviously it's in a PDF format and we have to send our documents out as PDF because so they can't be tampered with basically. But I'll try and come up with a plan in the future so that they can be readable. And obviously I did apologise. I wanted to send it out in advance, but you should hopefully get a copy after the meeting that you can look at. But I'll take that on board for future meetings.
Well, thank you very much, Anita. It's great to hear from you. We look forward to your report in the future, and you're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the meeting, or you are at liberty to retire if you wish.
I'll wait just till after internal audit and then I will go if that's okay.
That is fine. Right, so we then move on to agenda item 5, which is the internal audit progress report for Q2, and this is going to be presented by Mr. Chris Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as you've alluded to, this is our regular progress report to the corporate governance group. So I'll just walk you through the highlights. I'm happy to take any questions either as we go through or at the end. So section 1 just sets out the progress against the plan that was originally agreed by the committee at the start of the year. Everything is on track, and we have completed a further 4 pieces of internal audit work since the last meeting, which are set out in the next section. So 3 of those, NNDR, payroll and income and debtors, have attracted substantial assurance with no medium or high priority recommendations, which is an excellent state of affairs. There are some minor housekeeping, low priority, as they're termed in the reports, actions that have been agreed with the executive team, and those will be taken forward. But there are no issues to draw to the committee's attention in respect of those. We undertook a further review on the IT strategy within the council. This has come out as reasonable assurance, which is still above the line, so it still represents a positive assurance to the council. There were 4 housekeeping issues that came out of that report, but also 1 medium priority action, which is set out toward the end of the paper and relates to the Rushcliffe Service Improvement Programme, essentially, and the linkage with the EMT, and ensuring that the appropriate metrics and programme progress are reported to EMT on a regular basis. That action has been agreed, and a more formalised programme of reporting will be put in place going forward. Looking ahead, in section 3 sets out the remainder of the internal audit programme for the year. So as you can see, we are already engaged with the delivery of the third quarter's audits. So one of those markets has already been issued in draft, and the following 2 are already in progress this week. Those 4 reports at the top of that table will come through to the next meeting in February, and then there'll be 3 final reports that come through to the May 2019 meeting, along with our annual report for the year. Just finally, section 4 deals with some sort of more mundane internal audit matters, but particularly section 4.1, which draws your attention to changes to the audit programme. And in discussion with management, we have included a couple of additional reviews as part of the plan. The first of those was relating to Streetwise, and addressed some control issues that had been drawn to the management team's attention. So we have completed a piece of draft internal audit work on that, and we'll bring results of that through to the next meeting. Contract management was originally in the programme, but it was targeted at car parking, and what we've agreed is that we'll actually separate the audit allocation for the year out, and we'll still pick up car parking, as I've previously suggested in the previous section, but we'll also undertake a piece of work in relation to garage and fleet, and I think these are just representative changes, minor changes in the risk profile of the council, which is always useful, and as we always say at the start of the year when we present the plan, the programme needs to be flexible and change in accordance to the council's risk management framework and particular risks at that time. Then section A sets out a table which just draws your attention to the internal audit assignments that I brought previously to the committee, just so that you've got a complete picture of where we are on the particular year programme. So at that point, I'll take a pause, Chairman, and take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for that report? Councillor Walker.
My question is a simple jargon busting one. Are BSIs referred to in a number of places? What's that?
That's the Rushcliffe Borough Service Improvement Programme. So it's essentially the translation of the new sort of digital strategy into the council's operations. And it's a programme that covers all of the service areas. And the recommendation that we made was to align the reporting of that programme into the EMT.
Any other questions, Councillor McInnes?
Yeah, I'm on 4.3, and it asks a question. I just wondered whether we answer it, or since it does ask a question on 4.3. Does the officers make that decision, or do we'll make that decision, or do we both make it together?
What are you referring to in particular?
Well, it just would like to give the opportunity to consider how frequently you receive these feedback requests, and after each product, you go for the current option, monthly, quarterly, or executive lead only.
if I can pick that up, Councillor.
Thank you.
At the moment, the electronic surveys go out with each internal audit product. So each time we issue a draft internal audit report, a survey accompanies that.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? No? Okay, right. Just one slight question, as it's a hot topic. I suppose this question could come into every item agenda, so I might be fair and ask everyone the same question. Moving forward, the overall audit regime and all of the subjects, how are you, or what are you, or will you be considering Brexit as it unfolds?
Thank you for that, Chairman. I mean, clearly, it represents a risk to the council as well as every other organisation in the country. At the moment, we are still very much in the dark, and everybody is waiting to see how the final details of the deal take shape, and thereafter how they potentially impact on the council's operations. Clearly, the timing of the development of the 1920 programme. So in February we will be bringing a draft programme, a draft internal audit programme, which will cover the following financial year. Hopefully by that time there'll be a little bit more in the way of crystallised actions and more formalised notions of what's likely to be part of the deal, and we will be considering those when we're talking to officers and also members in terms of the development of the programme for next year.
Right, that's great to hear. Thank you very much. Yeah, please, Peter.
Just to emphasise that, and I haven't had any discussions with Councillor Beards, and we haven't planned this, but the Brexit risks are covered in Leanne's report as well. So when we talk about risk management, there's a bit of synergy there. So.
They say great minds think alike and fools never differ, so there we go. Right, okay, so any other questions for Chris? Comments? No. It's recommended that this group notes the second progress report for this next quarter, and all those in favour? Okay, we note the report. Thank you very much, Chris. You're free to leave as and when you wish. Right, so we now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 6, which is the Health and Safety Interim Report, and this is being presented by Leanne Ashmore.
Right, I've just got, I'm standing for Jo Wilkinson today, who normally presents to you, but with the dates change, I'm covering her report. So she's prepared a few slides which correspond with the report you've had in your notes, so I'll just run through those for you. To date, we've been completing the low-risk audits, and they'll be finalised and completed by March. So this first slide actually just looks at the goals that we've set ourselves at the beginning of the year. 11 policies are due to be reviewed within the next 12 months, simply because they haven't been reviewed in the last 3 years. There aren't any legislation changes, so it'll be a fairly light touch. We're looking at the new Standard for Gold award. The Workplace Health Champions have been very active in promoting national and local events, and we've got bronze and silver, and now we're looking at working towards gold. The next audit we're going to be undertaking is with the contractors in 2 high-risk areas, and they will be completed by March. This slide shows the training that has been completed by staff over the last 3 years. The total in the brackets is the cumulative total in the last 3 years. So this shows a high take-up of training across the organisation. This slide shows the accident report forms that have been completed. As you can see, it remains on a downward trend overall, with again fewer accident forms having been completed, and the incident rate is decreasing there. And this slide shows what those accidents have been in relation to. And as you can see, there's been a decline across the board in those areas. There are less accidents involving being struck by a moving object or slip, trip and fall compared to previous years, which has been one area that has historically caused some concern. The number of days absent from accidents in the first 6 months is 71. This is lower than the average figure for the last 4 years, which is 84. So again, a downward trend on the number of days absent from accidents. Breaking that down, 3 of those days were relate to new accidents, and 68 of those days, 68 of the 71 days, relate to an accident that occurred in May 2017, but the individual needed an operation to their shoulder as a result of their previous accident, which is why we've included it in the figures. So it really does show that really in the first 6 months we've only had three lost days due to accidents. This slide shows the accidents to the public, of which there have been 6. And the breakdown of that is a dog bite, 2 slips and trips that were not related to the environment, 2 play-related accidents that were not related to the environment, and they all occurred at the Rushcliffe Country Park. And the final accident, the 6th accident, was at Bridgeford Park, again relating to a play accident. And that's the end of the slides. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Leanne. Do we have any questions? With Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on section paragraph 5, section 5, it says 210 accidents to members of the public in the 6-month period. This compares to 155 for the same period in 2017. What was the increase due to? It's quite a considerable increase there.
I can get some further detail and bring that back to the next group.
If I could just actually interject there, I do know the answer. As Councillor Walker probably knows the answer as well, because it came up at Performance Management Board on Tuesday evening, and the reason is the increase in usage of the facilities. I can't remember what the figure is now, but it's significant. So pro rata. That was we all asked the same question, so that was the answer. So I'm sure if you go back and ask that question, that will be the answer. So perhaps I'm saving saving a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. So any other questions, Councillor Cooper?
Thank you, Chairman. It looks as though we're going to look at a new gold award for workplace health. It tells us sort of briefly what's happened over the last 6 months, but what in actual fact do we have to accomplish to get the gold award?
On a general basis, it's just integrating health and well-being, both physical and mental, within the workforce. And we've done this with various initiatives over the last 2 years, such as encouraging people to think about what they eat, helping people to de-stress and relax, and we have regular events for the staff across the organisation, in the office and also the depot sort of frontline operatives. So it's building on that basis to create a healthy, both physical and mental health for all employees through various initiatives and awareness campaigns. If you want specific details of criteria that need to be met, I can bring that for you next time.
I was going to suggest, Chairman, that we did have some further detail. Perhaps that can be arranged.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose it would be interesting. I think that's a good idea, Councillor Cooper, for us to, because we're being told every time we're getting silver, we're getting gold. It would be really useful to understand the level of achievement. That, I mean, gold sounds great, and it'd be great for us, if we're scrutinising it, to support that and understand the level of work that's gone into it. So yes, that's good. Councillor.
Thank you. On the same thought process, do these performance figures contribute to the Gold Award? All this stuff that was recorded here.
Not that I'm aware of specifically, no. I think it's taking a slightly different approach, but I'll get that criteria and we can see how it...
That's right, because reading that the Council Works Playhouse scheme has been under review for the last 2 years, with new versions going live at the end of September. So if you change the change the criteria,
that's the county council's. So it's the county council's scheme. So and they've been reviewing it. So yeah, I think it's not directly related to the information that's in this report, but I'll get that criteria for you. Some more information we'll bring back for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McInnes. Any other questions? Councillor Hetherington.
Could we have a breakdown, you think, of the actual accidents at the leisure centres? Because some of them under different contracts, and some have historically been better than others, basically. So could we have that sometime?
Yeah, they're on Appendix 1. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Lawrence.
Not so much a question, but I would just like to suggest that the group we actually congratulate our health and safety group, because these figures, whilst they're only high level and we need some more detail would be nice, really do indicate a significant improvement year on year on year, to the point at which we can start saying, what's the detail of these four, rather than some enormous number. And I think we're doing very well. We should be proud of these numbers.
Thank you very much for that comment, Councillor Lawrence. I tend to agree with you. You know, we've been looking at these for, well, I've been looking at this for 4 years, and you've been looking at it for a lot longer. And I have to say, it seems to be highly controlled. So, yes, I would agree, and perhaps we might note that in the minutes that we congratulate the work that is undertaken. Councillor Cooper.
Just looking at 2.1, table of staff training, and it mentions Legionnaire awareness, e-learning. Just a question a little bit, just expanding this a little bit. I remember when I was a school governor at primary school, when we talked about Legionnaire awareness, every morning the caretaker used to run the water to make sure that, you know, it was all okay. I mean, is that something that we do or do not do as part of this training?
Okay, so this training is an awareness training, so it could be for frontline operatives who actually undertake the testing, and it could be for the managers who just need to be aware of the testing that is required to make sure that a competent person is undertaking that testing. So our facilities team do undertake some of that water testing where it's appropriate. So we basically have a contractor who assesses all of our properties and the risk and how to mitigate that risk, and then we, as a council, usually through the facilities team and through the property team, implement that and keep records and make sure that that's all being carried through.
Okay, thank you, that's fine.
Any other questions? Councillor Purdy-Horan.
Yeah, I suppose it is a question. I'd like us to go further, actually, than what Councillor Lawrence suggested. In our employees, I would presume that the biggest risk is to our manual staff in terms of accidents and such like. These such low numbers are something that we should congratulate the staff, certainly at the depot, you know, and wherever else, from somebody like the chief executive, and to make the point that, you know, we do see these figures, and we want to comment on them and to thank them for the efforts that they make in making sure that people carry out their duties safely, because it can be a massive impact on colleagues in their teams. So, you know, as much praise, please, as possible.
Yeah, leadership is a very important aspect you point out there. So, Peter, would you like to comment on that? Is there a possibility that leadership could positively comment back to the workforce?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll pass on the comments to the group. Thank you.
I have a question. Earlier on in the presentation, you mentioned there are two high risk areas to complete. Was it risk assessments? Yeah. What are those high risk areas?
Let me just see the notes. One is manual handling, I believe. Yes, I know the first one, which is going to be carried out in January, is manual handling. I'm not sure what the second one is, but I can find out for you.
Yes, if you would, I think that would be useful to feedback. As you use the word high risk, obviously that puts red flashing lights up for me. So yeah, it'd be useful to know. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thanks very much for presenting the report. The recommendation is once again is that we considered that report. And with regard to the information presented, and I think as has been commented upon, I think we're all in agreement that the results on health and safety are extremely good, and keep up the good work, and we look forward to going gold, as they say. Going for gold. Okay, so we now move on to item 7, which is the risk management progress report. And I think that's your good self again. Yes.
Okay, so the risk management progress report has two parts to it. I'm going to discuss the risks and Brexit update, and Karen is going to discuss the Council's emergency planning, business continuity and CASLATE report. So you've got the papers. The recommendations to the group are to note the contents of the report, consider the actions taken to review the risk management arrangements and implement internal audit recommendations, and consider the work of the emergency planning officer and endorse the work of the local resilience group. So first, looking at the risk management update. An internal audit was carried out in June and found the council has the appropriate controls in place to manage the identified risks with no actions arising. Since this group last met, EMT has met twice as the risk management group to review the risks, and I'll just briefly run through the changes that have been made. So there are currently 35 corporate risks and 29 operational risks, which you've received the details of those before. The risk that has been removed is insufficient car parking at the arena, as the works to the car park have now been completed and there's plentiful car parking. A risk that has been added is unforeseen incidents occurring at public events. We've assessed this as having an impact of 4 and a likelihood of 2.
Can I just
Sorry, yes.
sorry to interrupt you, Flo. Have we not got any documentation to look at? You're referring to a whole list of risks. Normally we have them in front of us. Have we got them to look at on the screen, or we haven't got copies in our minutes? You might not be aware of that.
No, we've only altered 4 risks, so we haven't included a full list of risks this time. You had a full list of risks last time.
Are those risks that you're talking to? Are they in our reports? I can't see them.
Yeah, yes, they're
Those
detailed
four
on
there.
page
Ah, right.
32. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I was looking for the usual.
It's not because you had the
Right.
table last time, which sort of set out the years, the risks for the year,
Yes.
and then because there have just been a small number of changes, we've just put those changes rather than including the whole list.
That explains it.
If you want a whole list included in future, we can always put it as an appendix. That's not a problem.
Right.
Would you
Okay.
Would you prefer a full list in future?
I think so, because we need to be aware of everything that's out there. So that would be helpful. I think we've got a question coming in.
Could I ask about that, because it did occur to me about another risk, if it isn't already in the list, just to reassure myself, and that was as I read through other stuff and committees that I'm on, you know, I register that that's possible a risk and to check out whether there's the particular one that is about local plan part 2, given what the situation with the decline in number of years, you know, that would be an increased risk, and really whether that was covered in the bigger list.
Yes, we do have a risk. It's not phrased quite like that. It's more in relation to our position in terms of the housing land supply and our risk in being able to meet it. So it's what you're talking about, but it's phrased slightly differently. So yes, we do have that captured as a risk.
But it's got to a level that we had a motion on it and making representations to the government. So, you know, it's a serious risk, which is being examined at the moment.
Yes, and we do have that recorded as a risk. Yes,
yeah.
And one of the changes as well that I'm just going to come on to is around
Right.
the
Okay.
impact of that.
Okay, Leanne. So sorry to interrupt you. We'll let you carry on, but please take your time. You're sort of going along there without taking a breath. So breathe a little bit.
Oops. Okay, so the added risk has been unforeseen incidents occurring at public events. We've assessed this as having an impact of 4 and a likelihood of 2. And a plan is being prepared to look at how we can reduce the risk of an occurrence happening at council-run events in the future. So we can try and get that score back down. The risks that have been amended, the first, inadequate capital resources. The likelihood has increased from 1 to 2 due to increased demand on the capital programme. The second risk that has been amended is significant reduction in staff morale. The likelihood has increased from 1 to 2 and the impact has decreased from 3 to 2. So the overall risk increase has increased from 3 to 4. So that's to reflect the uncertainty around the Nottinghamshire unitary bid and the move of manual staff from Abbey Road Depot. The third amended risk is the inability to draw down Growth Deal 2 funding. Timescales, within timescales, likelihood has decreased from 3 to 2 and impact has decreased from 4 to 3. This is because the scheme that we originally had the Growth Deal funding for no longer exists, and we've shifted the funding to another scheme which doesn't have quite the same impact. So if we're unable to draw it down, it doesn't have the same impact. And the final change is defending appeals for large residential developments. So, Councillor McGuinness, that's going back to your point, and potential award of costs. We've increased the likelihood from 2 to 3 due to the council having to defend 2 appeals recently, which have incurred costs. So that's the conclusion of the risk report. If there are any questions?
Any questions for Leanne on the risk report thus far? Okay, we'll move on to the next section of the presentation.
Okay, so this is looking at Brexit and the risk around that. So the first table you've got in your report there shows the timeline moving from now to Brexit Day, and the transition period after that. There have been technical notices from the government. They've been released detailing the government's plans for a no-deal Brexit, and they include instructions for businesses and households on how to prepare for that eventuality. From these notes, we've looked at the potential risks, and they are on your page 34. And we have plotted those, we've assessed those for risk to Rushcliffe. So at a local level, what risk might they have to Rushcliffe? That has been plotted on your page 35. So if you look at pages 34 and 35 in conjunction, so the list on page 34 from A to I lists the possible risks from a no-deal Brexit. So we've looked at each of those and assessed what we think the likely risk of that is to Rushcliffe. And from where we've plotted them, it's a relatively low risk at this time. However, we have got it under review. So as the landscape changes, those risks will be reviewed. Did you want
sorry
to...
if I just interrupt you, because I've got a question which is relevant right now.
Yeah.
So rather than just going back later, you just touched on it actually, because this is such a dynamic situation. How often are you reviewing this as things happen? Like, for example, this week, statement from Mr. Carney, the Bank of England, is going to have a massive impact on future finance and financial decisions. In particular, the prediction that house prices will drop significantly and property prices will drop significantly. Bearing in mind we've got a heavy investment in property and plan to do so in the future.
Excuse me.
So, sorry. So, how have you assessed those risks?
This is getting highly political.
No, it's not political.
Are we launching Project Hysteria?
I'm sorry. I'm asking a question, Councillor Oren.
Yes, I know, and I'm saying this is getting highly.
I'm not being political. I'm asking a question about risk, and if you listen to the whole question, which you haven't, you will understand what the question is about and that it isn't political. So, the question is, because things are changing dynamically, i.e. what the statement has been this week, which would have an impact financially, how often are we, or you guys, evaluating these risks?
Okay, so we have a regular programme of meetings to look at the risks. However, when we hear something in the news that is outside of the programme, then it's always brought forward to an EMT meeting, so a meeting of the executive managers and chief exec, and they will discuss that there. And if there needs to be a change to the risk, that is made. So they meet every week, every Tuesday. So being abreast of the news and those updates, it will be discussed at that forum on a weekly basis, outside of the normal programme. Okay.
That's great. Well, I was interested to know that risks are being assessed live, basically. Yeah, okay. Sorry, if you continue, thank you.
Okay, so you can see the risks on page 34. I wasn't proposing to go through them one by one, but I can do if you would like to consider them. But basically, the main message is we've assessed the risks. It's relatively low at the moment for Rushcliffe, given the types of risks they are, and that the picture is unknown to a large extent. But it's on our radar, and we'll continue to review it as we go forward, and we can bring it back at a future date.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I don't understand why we're discussing Brexit here, apart from certain risks, but aviation safety. What risk has that got to do with Rushcliffe?
Well, exactly. This list is taken from the government's list of potential risks. So we've looked at it and we've said, actually, there's very little risk there for us. So all we've done is we've taken the risks on a national level and applied them to Rushcliffe and said, okay, so nationally they might have this impact if we had an airport in our area, or if we had an airport in our area that had a high cargo interest, then that would have a high risk. We've assessed it and said, well, we don't have those risks particularly, so it's a low risk. But we've looked at it, that's the point.
Well, firstly, we've got the largest freight terminal just on our doorsteps, just a mile over the border of Rushcliffe, called East Midlands Airport. And secondly, I hold an EASA pilot's licence, and as far as I know, my licence will be valid still after the 29th of March. That's what I've been told.
Any other questions?
I would say,
Let's not get bogged down about what we think will happen with Brexit. We're only interested in risks, and I have to say, risk management and risk assessment has to include every possibility. You might discount it because it's not relevant, but you've got to have evaluated it. So, you know, let's not try and get too bogged down into it. Councillor McInnes.
I was just going to say, I read the one about aviation safety as well. It does say potential, but I think all of them are potential. But that's also a national issue. It might be a local issue, because aeroplanes, if they're not, how do they describe it here? If they don't comply with the nation's that they're going to rules on these things, they can't go. So it's a national thing that really doesn't affect us, but there's a at that level, but it might or might not do it at the local level.
Yeah, and I think the point is, you know, we could get into a very long debate about aviation safety and aviation law. It covers a massive subject, a subject that I'm very au fait and familiar with, but it's been assessed. That's all we need to know, I think.
Can I just say,
Any other
Chair,
questions?
that most of the world takes the aviation safety from the UK. We lead the world in it, so I think our aircraft are probably the safest in the world.
Totally agree. Right. Any other questions? Let's not go off piste here. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you very much, Leanne. We're going to go on to emergency planning now.
Thank you. So I just propose to talk you through parts of the report, and then I've got a presentation on the Kerslake report to put that into more context. So the main part of emergency planning partly this year was internal audit conducted, a business continuity audit. There was an extensive list that they were looking at of whether we had a sort of corporate plan, whether roles and responsibilities were clearly documented, whether job descriptions included business continuity. They looked at specifically IT, business continuity, disaster recovery, as well as the corporate business continuity. Did we have business impact assessments? Are there named individuals, named roles? Storage of our plans and this kind of thing. So yeah, they were quite thorough, shall I say, but their conclusion was that they were happy that there is substantial assurance that the council has got appropriate business continuity arrangements in place, and they made a recommendation that a template we were testing for corporately recording business continuity incidents so that everyone records them the same, that we roll that out to all service managers and lead specialists. So the depot and the customer service centre had tested it for us, and that seemed to work, so they recommended that we roll that out as well. So they were assured and happy that business continuity was in place and we had the right plans. It does help having moved to this building that we did substantial work around ensuring our business continuity was in place for the very move of moving here, so that, you know, should there be any problems, we have business continuity in place. Plans, a couple have been approved this year. The Rushcliffe Local Flood Response Plan, in line with its 3-year cycle, has been reviewed by the Environment Agency and ourselves and County Council. And Gotham has been added specifically because of its surface water flood risk. Before, a lot of the communities in the plan are around river risk, and so because unfortunately Gotham had such big flooding, we specifically asked for that to be put in, so that's now in there as well, which is definitely progress. Exercises, it's been a busy year. We had a large scale exercise back in May, which was Silver Siren, when we worked with the RAF. It was a multi-agency exercise. It was kind of live exercise testing the actual operational response around a military air crash. And with us having RAF Syston in our area, they used that as a location and etc. So they tested all of their response to that. And then we've just had Jerboa Resilience, which was part 2 of it, which was the recovery from that incident, which was slightly added to with a bit more incident, shall I say. So there was a big plane with a little plane as well. So yeah, that was a busy week last week, which I should talk about a bit on Kerslake. So we've had 2 major exercises within a year, testing our strategic coordinating groups. Last week we tested our mass fatalities coordinating group and recovery coordinating groups. We've been training this year as normal, so we have a plan to make sure all of executive management team are trained in all of the leadership response and multi-agency. So we've now got nearly all of them trained in strategic tactical groups and recovery. We've got 1 more staff each year, next year to train. They kind of run them a couple of times a year, so we have a rotation to get everybody trained as such. So that's nearly done. There's been various counter-terrorism workshops happening this year. As you can imagine, it's quite a top topic list from us in emergency planning at the moment. So there's been various trainings and activities, and also we've been running some site clearance training using lessons from Grenville, the Leicestershire Hinkley Road explosion, which was the house with the flat and shop that demolished. Sadly, 5 people died, and the quite topical again this year, the Novichok Salisbury type incident, and looking at the reality of quite how much of Salisbury was closed down for site clearance and things. So there's been various trainings that Rushcliffe staff have been going to, and then we've just also trained operational staff in water awareness training. It was part of their refresher, so operational staff from kind of the streetwise and environmental health officers have just been trained just in time for kind of flood season, so hopefully no flooding.
Hopefully not.
And that's the report, and then there's a small section, I'll just scroll down in my report, on the background to the Kerslake report, and I've just got a small presentation for that.
Thank you.
So just a background, the Kerslake report is in relation to the Manchester Arena attack. It was commissioned by Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham to look kind of independently at the incident, what could be learned, what went wrong, what worked well, and what can we all learn from it, as it were. So that's just a kind of timeline to remind you and help you understand the kind of rapid everything that was happening. So it was the 22nd of May 2017. The bomber detonated the bomb at about 10:30. So as you're aware, it was in the concourse of the arena. It's actually part of the station. So British Transport Police were on the scene straight away because it's under their jurisdiction, and clearly they were on duty for such a huge event. So they declared a major incident really, really quickly. A reception centre was opened at the Etihad Stadium at Manchester City Council, which is actually one of their pre-arranged rest centres anyway, because of the arena and the football grounds and everything there so close to each other. A strategic coordinating group was up and running by 4 o'clock in the morning. one of the Kerslake report recommendations is actually that this should be able to have one of these within 2 hours, whether that's virtual or in person. Currently, our local resilience forum policy was that we would have it within the minimum of 4, so ours is now being changed that we could, if required, have one within 2 hours for a virtual telephone conference if required. You can see that there in the morning, the first meeting of the coroner and the police senior identification manager took place, and the first meeting of the mass fatality coordinating group was taking place really early the next morning, and within that first day they had temporary storage set up at the Manchester Arena, and all of the victims were moved to that by the end of that first day. And by the end of the first day, police family liaison officers were allocated to all the families. Sadly, the only people that went to the Etihad Stadium were actually the people who'd lost relatives. So I'm sure we've all seen in the press there was lots around. There are lost children and there are lone children. There apparently were actually no lone children. Everyone found each other and etc. So sadly, the only people that made it to the Etihad were actually the people that were looking for loved ones, and sadly they were looking for them because they weren't lost. They were sadly injured or killed by the bomb. And then at 6 o'clock that first day, there was also a public vigil, partly kind of arranged via Facebook and the public kind of suggesting where to have it, but as well as the response and dealing with the families and the bereaved and the incident, the site, and obviously the potential terrorism threat. They were also dealing with public events and vigils and things. So just to give you an idea of the sort of complex nature of how response works, there were 22 people killed, 139 were injured. A lot of those were life-threatening, life-changing injuries, and more than half of those were children, and several hundred, unknown number at the moment, with sort of psychological trauma as well. So the arena itself had 14,200 capacity, but there were also all the mums, dads, grandpas and everybody else collecting everybody that was in the arena. There was also all of the sort of street cleaners, the door staff and everybody else outside the arena that ran to help as well. So the impact is huge and the numbers are also huge. There were a few major issues faced during this first early stages. The police have a telephone number called Casualty Bureau. That's the number you get on the telly that says, please ring this number for friends, families. Unfortunately that failed. Vodafone, not sure what happened, but Vodafone failed to work, and so the Casualty Bureau wasn't working, so the police were unable really quickly to have this first emergency number up, as it were. So the Kerslake report, so it was set up by Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester, and as it says there, it was predominantly to kind of make sure that the people involved in the attack were at the heart of the review. So as well as looking at what could have worked better, what we could have learned, what did work well, as it were, it was just to make sure that the people involved were at the heart of this. So there were lots of interviews and things with people affected, so that actually they were involved rather than just all of the incident responders as such. So it was published in this year, March 2018. If any of you have read it, it's 200 pages. It's quite big. There are 50 recommendations for both single agency and multi-agency. You may have seen in the news that there's quite a lot for fire service recommended, and there were issues for Manchester Fire and Rescue around their deployments and things. So our fire service has been taking that on board to see whether it would work the same here and things. So the Nottinghamshire Local Resilience Forum, we've reviewed the 50 recommendations through the risk group and the resilience working group, and where they're single agencies have taken those to review and see whether we have things in place, we need to review them or we need to adapt things. And where they're kind of topic specific, they've been given to one of the many subgroups, so that the subgroups again can look at, do our plans stand up to those? Do we need to adjust our plans? Are there things we need to put in our work plans to ensure that we develop actions as such? So, and it's looking at both response and recovery. So response was the first sort of 9 days, and the scene and the evidence recovery, but then the longer recovery is still going on now, and there are obviously people now still psychologically affected and injured from it. So recovery is always much longer than response. I've just picked out a couple of recommendations. These slides are quite wordy, but I thought it was important that you saw what the actual recommendation was. There was a police one which does link into a lot of our work around victim identification. You may well have seen the families with the pictures of have you seen my loved one, as it were. So sadly in my world they're never missing. We know exactly where they are. Unfortunately they're in the temporary body storage, but for the loved ones at this point they can't find their loved ones. So it's been raised that information should be given to families and also to the wider population, so they understand what the process is. There is quite a specific, it's named there as disaster victim identification. It's quite a specific process. It takes time because it's really important we identify who everybody is correctly, and we make sure that loved ones get the correct people back. And so there is a process. It can take a while, and it's not as quick as people think. So nationally, police have been tasked with writing a kind of script so that we can brief yourselves and our managers and things at the time to explain that this is why it will take so long. It's never going to be a sort of 2 days and everybody's identified. There is, it takes time, but that's because they're making sure they get it right as such. So there's some work nationally being done around that, and that's feeding into our mass fatalities plan. Disaster funds. Ooh, on the right. Sorry, I've got 2 slides going here. It's confused myself. Manchester used the We Love Manchester Fund. It was a fund they already have set up. They already do things in Manchester where they raise funds and things, so they used that. And you'll have seen, I'm sure on the telly, that everybody was raising funds with every Just Giving site available as such. So it's really important to have the one named site. This is the official one. Wherever else you want to collect money, that's up to them, but this is the one named official, and this is the criteria, etc. So again, it was recommended there that it's ensured that we have these facilities. Last week we had a recovery exercise, and I'm looking at Peter and Sarah, who we specifically had finance and legal group, and our staff sat on that. I'm sure we had a interesting afternoon. It was a multi-agency table of various finance staff so that they could talk through some of these issues. We specifically planned the scenario and the issue so that we could discuss some of the Kerslake feedback as well. So they've had this discussion, and the Red Cross were able to feed in that actually they can set up disaster funds for us. That's what they do all the time, and how that might work. So there was lots of discussion, and then work will come out of that to ensure that we can do something if we need to at the time as such. But we took the opportunity to be able to test that. Health, one of the other big ones that comes out of Kerslake is clearly the psychological trauma and the effects. Lots of children, lots of people, as I said, in the arena and outside. So there's a recommendation that emergency plans have incorporate contingencies for mental health support. We have a very active humanitarian assistance group within the Local Resilience Forum, and we already have an array of plans that have a crisis support team that work directly with the family liaison officers, with the bereaved. We have trauma leaflets already written. We work very closely with staff from the Mental Health Trust from the Trauma and Growth Centre based here in Nottingham. So we already have common sort of trauma reactions and things that we can issue to people so that they're aware that right now it's because a bomb's just gone off that you're experiencing this, and that's quite normal. And our mental health colleagues from mental health teams sit on that group and are part of the planning. So again, in last week's recovery exercise, as part of recovery, there is a health and welfare group. And again, they were specifically looking at what humanitarian assistance would be set up and how it would be coordinated for a big incident as such. So we were able again to build some of these into the exercise to retest organisations, and then they're going to relook at humanitarian plans and things. So just so you know what they were kind of looking at last week for recovery, this is our fake news that we created for them. The Army have adapted the scenario for us, so it was a passenger plane hitting a Learjet over Nottinghamshire. The Learjet crashed on the A46 and the passenger plane crashed throughout Newark and Sherwood and Gedling. Sounds like we're brilliant at making things up, but actually that is a Shoreham air disaster. So that was basically what the A46 incident was, and the passenger plane was effectively Kegworth or Lockerbie type disaster. So, you know, these things do happen and can, hopefully not all on the same day, but it is possible. So that's what they were recovering from and working through. In recovery, there's 5 subgroups and a coordinating group, so we tested all of them last week. So lots of staff that haven't been involved in incidents were able to sit around the table, work in multi-agencies and have those discussions now rather than doing it at the time as such. So we took the opportunity to build in some of the Kerslake questions and recommendations to see whether our plans and things work. And then finally, just to put it into context, it was clearly an arena. What do we have in Rushcliffe? Do we have similar? And clearly we do have crowded place venues here in Rushcliffe, so we do have the cricket ground and we do have Forest football ground, and then there are lots of events, Christmas light switches on, this kind of thing. So I think that links to the risk earlier about unexplained incidents at events. What we're talking about is a terrorist attack is actually the wording. So there's been lots of work in the last sort of year and a half. There's been counter-terrorism workshops for event organisers, and that's for big, like the Nottingham Arena and the cricket ground and the football clubs, but also our event staff here have taken part in workshops for smaller scale events, but are still crowded places. So the counter-terrorism security advisors have led that from the police, and they've had briefings. There's been moved to critical workshops, so after a lot of these attacks, the critical level goes up, whether we think there's going to be another attack and what the impact of that is, whether we have the incident or whether the incident might be in Leicestershire, but the level goes to critical, and so what are the impacts? And again, the large scale venues have been involved in that because clearly they have, you know, potentially a target as such, but the police assure us that there's no known intelligence that we are specifically at risk, but clearly they're planning for everybody. There's been lots of briefings on hostile vehicle mitigation measures, which if you've driven over Trent Bridge recently, well, they're the bollards, they just have a posh name. So obviously after the Westminster attacks, the temporary assets went up on the bridge and around the cricket, and then more barriers went up this summer around the cricket because of the high profile games that were on, and there's currently work going on to look at a more permanent solution, because those are temporary things that are part of police national assets, but there is work to done to have more permanent vehicle mitigation measures, which basically means, you know, vans and cars can't be driven into people queuing really. Sadly, the Manchester Arena person wasn't driving a vehicle, was just a person, and so still there's lots of work done around, and our events team are involved in it, are looking at what does that look like, what is the threat, what are they looking for, what can they do around it, and we've got very close links of our counter-terrorism security advisors here in Nottinghamshire, so they're based at the police headquarters and will come out and brief us, give us updates or run workshops and things for us. So as reassuring as we can be, there is lots of work being done for our large-scale crowded places that hopefully we will never need to use as such, but that, you know, should hopefully all link into Kerslake should we need it. Any questions?
Right, thank you very much, Karen. Very comprehensive and very thorough. Any questions for Karen on those subjects? Any questions? Comments? Councillor Purley-Horrocks?
Well, thank you, and thank you for that presentation. It is very helpful that the authorities have taken those very seriously. And of course, we have to recognise that we have national arenas, obviously the cricket and the football. But I have to say, Mr. Chairman, that you look at these events and they are extremely, thankfully, rare. But I myself have been involved in 2 emergencies recently in Bingham, I think you have actually as well, and perhaps Councillor Lawrence. The first one was when a pipe was broken in Epperstone, Severn Trent pipe, and a car went into it and all that. And then it happened again, and quite recently, during the hot summer.
Indeed.
And I have to say, it was very chaotic and woeful in terms of organisation. And I appreciate Severn Trent were the lead agency on this. I got all my information from the Jungle Drums Facebook, local Facebook pages. It was only actually the following day I realised that the chief executive had been tweeting. So our own communication to our own councillors, who are community leaders, was sadly lacking. And what concerned some of us, and we haven't had time really to sort of delve into it, what concerned some of us was there are lots of vulnerable people who now we don't know where some of them are because of GDPR and all that. We can guess various complexes because of our own local knowledge, Granby Court and other places in Bingham. But I was extremely disappointed that Severn Trent or someone else was not able to get a grip on the situation, and it was late on a Sunday afternoon this year when the word went out that Severn Trent had sent lorries to Two-Till car park with bottles of water, and then fortunately, although the prediction was that I think somebody said mid-afternoon on Monday there would be supplies. I think fortunately something happened and we were plugged back into the system 11 o'clock on Sunday night. But I really was concerned that there must have been some people there, that, you know, elderly especially, vulnerable adults that might have been struggling that day, a hot summer's Sunday afternoon.
I would just concur with that, and on that Sunday afternoon I sat in my house thinking, all of the vulnerable people in this area, I'm okay because I found out from Severn Trent website. I kept logging on my phone to know that the water was going to be distributed. But I thought, what about all these old people around me that don't use the internet or can't, or maybe blind, or for massive reasons wouldn't be able to get their water on what was an incredibly hot day. But I'd also add to it, I mean, we're not having a dig because these are lessons learned, aren't they? And the other thing I think is a lesson from this, I arrived in my car to pick the water up. It was a really bad location because there's just one row of traffic blocked up the road, and I don't know if you've been down there to where it's distributed. There was a massive row of cars, couldn't get up, couldn't get down. People were turning up in lorries because that's their only means of transport to pick it up. So a couple of lessons learnt on there, I think, could be fed back. Certainly from this.
It was a good site. It was a good site. It just needed perhaps a couple of volunteers, one on Tithby Road, saying come in this way, and the others down at the other end onto the Grantham Road, saying you go out that way. Or indeed, they could have done it at the.
So some sort of real life lessons from your council, and the other point that Councillor Purdy-Horan makes is communication was really not adequate enough to reach the general population. And Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. Firstly, on the vulnerable people, with my Nottinghamshire Fire Authority hat on, which Francis is a member of, but he wasn't on the committee that we discussed this. We've got a list of vulnerable people. The Fire Authority, or the Fire Brigade, work with certain agencies. So when we've got problems in areas, they've got lists. We know where to go. I don't know whether Karen's aware of that. So that there are contacts that you could find, work with.
So was water distributed to vulnerable locations, people in vulnerable positions?
Yes, so Severn Trent have got a vulnerable people's list themselves. So if the one thing you can do from today is to encourage your communities to, if they are vulnerable, and vulnerability is a massive scale. It's not just you have to be over 65. There's a massive vulnerability scale. You can register with Severn Trent and be on their priority service list. If you're on the list, when the water goes off, they bring water automatically to you. So they also do care homes and vulnerable sites that they already have named on their list. And then if it's much wider, we have a vulnerable people's plan, so that health ourselves at county council, well, my other job, the county council, and fire and things that already hold lists as well, we can collate that. But the idea is to be on Severn Trent's list because they're the ones with the water that will bring it directly to you. So, if you do nothing else, if you could absolutely, we did after the Nightmare Pipe in Epperstone, Severn Trent spoke to us recently and said that actually they are thinking about physically replacing the whole pipe because clearly it's gone twice, and every time it goes, it's a whole part of Rushcliffe that goes off and not Newark and Sherwood. So if they, they are seriously considering reviewing the whole pipe. They are reviewing their sites for bottled water distribution. They kind of pre-designate them, but they are reviewing that because at the last incident they only opened one at Bingham, and there were quite a lot of people at Radcliffe-on-Trent that then couldn't access it. So they have recently been to the Radcliffe-on-Trent Parish Council meeting, and they have said that they are going to, please God it doesn't happen again, they're going to definitely open one in Radcliffe-on-Trent next time, and they realised that that was an oversight, that only having one in Bingham, nobody from Radcliffe-on-Trent could get to it as such. But vulnerable is always a problem if there's water and things going off, which is why we do lots of work to try and encourage people. So the first time the pipe broke, we did have promotions in the Rushcliffe reports that goes to every household. People may or may not read it. It may get recycled quite quickly, but there was an article in there to help encourage people and to encourage others to help their vulnerable relatives to get yourselves on that register. But we like to stress it's not just over 65. There is a wrath of vulnerability that entitles you, and if people get themselves on the list, water gets brought to you, so we don't have to worry about them.
Yeah, that's great to know. I think I'd like to just get a consensus of opinion. I think as an action from this evening, we perhaps should put something out to all our members so they understand this. I didn't know about that. I obviously didn't read it, so perhaps that could be something goes into members' matters next time, please. Yeah, Councillor Lawrence.
As Councillor Hodgie-Horn has indicated, my ward was also quite badly affected by this. Apart from everything that you have heard so far, what we found in East Bridgford and surrounding villages, and it actually went out into Aslockton and whatever, was everybody was getting very excited that Bingham's water was off, and people were getting a bit upset that parts of Radcliffe hadn't got any water, and we were on the phone to everybody saying, look, we're off as well. And they were saying, are you? Not, we've got, and it wasn't on their list. And eventually somebody said, in some sense, I suppose you must be. And we have vulnerable people, but we didn't get any water, and we couldn't get any out of Bingham because the traffic jam was all back right the way out. And it was very, very upsetting. I had 4 villages who were all totally without water, and there was at least 3 more that contacted me because they weren't getting anywhere. So it's right across as far as Aslockton. And we just managed. We had to. We weren't going to get any help. We're quite used to that. So we had an exercise to collect water from bottles of water from people who had we knew had got plenty. We got it to the old people, which we're small enough to know where our vulnerable people are. Somebody went and raided Lidl, and that sorted it. But I think one of the things that needs to be done is that there needs to be, and I think it's a borough job, an assessment of, when we get an issue like that, an assessment of who is affected. because we clearly didn't have it on that occasion, the two big villages got identified. It must have been bloody obvious that the rest of us were equally affected.
If I could just speak back on that, Severn Trent clearly have the maps of where all their pipes are, and then they know who won't have water and who will have low pressure, etc. But we find that getting an accurate picture from them can be difficult because it's gone twice now, and they should kind of know from experience where these, the effects are. But often they know where the network is, but they're not entirely sure always of have you got low pressure or have you got no water. But they know that they can tell us which area is being affected as such. So we rely on the information from them. Under DEFRA guidelines, Severn Trent actually have to be able to be self-sufficient, and they should be able to cater for up to, I think it's 50,000 people before they need to ask for assistance as such. So assistance is offered from multi-agency partners, but they are supposed to be able to be self-sufficient under DEFRA guidelines and provide bottled water sites, etc., if required. They have there's a really strange guideline, and it's not as quick as we think that your water goes off and you'll get bottled water. It is something like apparently we can all live for about 6 to 8 hours, as it were, before they have to think about issuing the bottled water. So they do think early about the site, but obviously they're always hopeful that in 8 hours they'll fix it. But we know from experience, every time the Epsom pipe has been off, it is about 12 hours. People wake up to no water and they go to bed with no water. So the second time they did activate those bottled water sites quicker. They do have arrangements with British Red Cross to staff those and assist people and such. But yeah, they've learned that, and the Resilience Forum have discussed with them that actually, bottled water sites need setting up more and quicker as such.
Are you in a position to feed back what you've heard tonight? Yeah. Because, I'm sitting here thinking, is it a case where we should actually get Severn Trent here to this meeting? I'm actually on the borderline of thinking that at the moment. Well, what does everyone else think? I mean, it's not my decision, is it? It's the group's decision. Do we bring them in? Because it was quite a serious situation.
Mr. Chairman, I think partnership delivery absolutely appropriate. They're not partners. They're not partners, but they are an important agency that makes sure that our society functions effectively. So in that sense, they're a partner, certainly the community.
I mean, I'm thinking in terms of we're talking about a very specific risk, and that's what this group is about.
What I wanted to sort of bring to your attention, perhaps primarily, was that these big national events, I could see them happening down in London. It was unfortunate, it was in Manchester, of course, but mainly London. Yes, I acknowledge that we've got a couple of iconic sports grounds, but really, what is the biggest risk to little old Rushcliffe, and more specifically our villages, perhaps not so much West
Our
Ridgeford.
biggest risk is actually flooding.
Flooding in particular.
The top of the community risk register is flooding, and we've got quite a lot of communities that flood.
Councillor Brown.
My second point I was going to make regarding incidents that can happen, and it's the 30th anniversary in about 6 weeks' time of the Kegworth air crash, which affected the south of this area quite considerably, even though it was on the motorway in Leicestershire, just across the border. The M1 was closed for 6 weeks, and I can guarantee that the villages around the south of this county was it was chaos for 6 weeks, because every bit of that traffic was being routed through South Rushcliffe. So just to remind people that incidents do happen, and it does affect the small villages quite severely when that happens.
Just to put it into context, I know I'm hoping, please God, big incidents never happen, but all of the plans and practices we have are used for other incidents as well. They're just scalable. So if we think back to the Newark house explosion, so not in our area, but smaller scale in terms of a house, so humanitarian assistance was still used, recovery was still used, our trauma leaflet was still used. our reception centres were still used. So all of our plans, actually we can use them a much smaller scale. We just round them up for something that's much bigger as such. But you know, we've used trauma leaflets in flooding, and we've used them in Newark House explosion. So can happen.
To just like to back up on that, a couple of months ago we had the large fire at Sutton Boddington, which I was called out for on the fire side. But when I got there, Rushcliffe had already dealt with the houses that had been evacuated quite well, and yeah, so the system does work. Yeah.
Excellent. Sorry, Councillor McKees. I think having discussed it with Peter, it's unlikely we're going to get Severn Trent in, and I think that the best way forward is just to go back to what we originally suggested. Can the risk team feed back to Severn Trent our concerns, our experiences that you've heard this evening, and then can you come back to this meeting with what the mitigation will be in the future for those concerns? Does that sound a good idea?
Wouldn't it be an idea to liaise possibly with local parish councils on this, to have drop-off points for water? So if in the event again you can say, well, the water's going to go A, B, C and D, and just advise the local residents, well, the water's going to be in your village hall, rather than queue to go in Bingham or wherever.
Yes,
Surely
and that may form part of your response back, having looked into it in more detail.
From the top of my head, I'm sure because of the scale and what they need to provide on the DEFRA guidelines, I don't think they ever look to do drops everywhere. I think they go for 3 or 4 big sites because it's a nightmare for people to get to, but to administer and have Red Cross volunteers at a couple of bigger sites is easier as such, but sometimes, yeah, it can't always happen. But I'll ask them, but I'm fairly sure from reading the critical infrastructure plan that they go for more. They're often in like supermarket, car parks and things like that. It's big areas rather than it's in the local village hall, it's in the pub, it's, you know, which would be easier to get to, but I can certainly ask
Yes,
them.
but the important point is we'd like you to feedback the things that we've experienced and then investigate how they might be mitigated in the future in various ways. It must have cost Severn Trent an enormous amount of money because I was paid £50. How many thousands of people got a £50 credit? It must have cost them a fortune. So did you have another question?
I did. Slightly off of that one. I just wondered, is there a view or in respect of the role of councillors in these emergencies? I'm the councillor for the Trent Bridge Ward, and I recall in 2003 being contacted by a lot of people who live along by the steps and were not aware of the flood defence, and the water was lapping along the top and they'd not received any bags or anything like that. They did come, so but there was a lot of concern, and people were going away and buying bags and putting them on the front door. So, I just wondered. I wasn't met with much encouragement when I did ask. You know, what can I do to help? Internally, that was from the chief exec at the time, who saw me sort of as interfering, although I had a lot of experience about emergencies in previous jobs. So, you know, it would avoid that. I mean, is there a role? If there isn't a role, then that needs to be made clear before events. But if there is a role, I mean, the attitude's taken to volunteers, isn't it, in a way? I think after the Manchester, that, you know, people do come and they want to do something, and is to actually try and use that energy that's around in a useful and productive way that actually helps rather than hinders. So
there's absolutely a role for yourselves in emergencies. There is a elected members information document that is available that we can reissue that explains kind of roles, sort of before and during. It has some briefings around some of the snow and flooding situation. You've got some sort of basic background, but there's absolutely a role in that. Actually, you're our community eyes and ears out there, and you can be liaising with your communities, and you can be feeding back the issues to us that we might not know about because of it's a a widespread incident or something. So yeah, there is a document that at least sets that out beforehand of how you can all fit into that in an emergency and work with your communities and us at the time as such. So absolutely, there's a role for it.
This very same question came up a couple of meetings ago, and we put the question to the officers, and the officers sent a link through the members' matters highlighting the fact that it's on the intranet. So there is a document on the intranet.
Okay.
With that respect, which must be the document you're referring to. Do we have any? Councillor Walker.
So the Kerslake report, Manchester Metropolitan Authority, obviously we're in a different system of local government. So briefly, where do the Borough Council's responsibilities end in a situation like the ones you've been planning for and the counties start?
Sorry. If it's a widespread incident, so if it was flooding that affected districts and boroughs, then we designate a lead authority to lead on the recovery, which would be the county council, because it's widespread. If it was something that was localised, like the Newark House explosion that was localised just to their area, then Rushcliffe would be the lead local authority for that. All of our services and everything we already do continue. We just do our normal jobs in extenuating circumstances.
So, major incident at Trent Bridge, there's a decision taken quickly about who's gaffering it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, county council would have something of major that's going to be national news, isn't it? That's good, potentially. God forbid what could happen. Manchester Arena, Cobra Met. It's national. And so I've trained Pete to kind of go, can we have mutual aid from the county council? And the county council would lead that for us because of either it's widespread or because of its because of the national nature of it. So if it's manageable, then we could lead it with support from the county council. But if it's widespread, then the built-in system is that they would lead for us. We're still involved in supporting, but there's a bigger mechanism that can lead.
Right, okay then. So, Karen, thank you very much. I think we've grilled you enough this evening, and a very comprehensive report. I think it's been very important to go through the report that you did. Very sobering in some respects, but good to know that there are people working on these potential disasters, and great that we've been able to give you our experiences. We look forward to getting some feedback. So on page 31 of the report, the recommendations are there. I won't read them out. I think we're all in agreement that we're happy to note the report and move on. So thank you very much, Karen. Thank you, Leanne. You're free to go should you need to. And we'll now move on to the next item, which is item 8, the Treasury Management 6-monthly update. This is going to be really interesting post the training we had from Feroza. I certainly maybe have a few questions based on something that was picked up there, but I'll hand over to Peter.
Thank you. Well, hopefully you all enjoyed the Treasury Management training, and certainly Councillor Purdue-Holland got his explanations in for when he goes door knocking.
Yeah. You're not being political.
Yeah. But hopefully feel more enlightened. Obviously there's some technical terminology, and you'd have probably picked up on some of that, but I suppose importantly the risks and challenges that we still face with regards to our treasury and the work that we do at the council. So I was going to pick up on a lot of the treasury stuff. I'm going to pick up some of the commercial investment stuff. So without further ado, I will pass on to Sarah.
Okay, so the Capital Investment Strategy mid-year report summarises the position of the Council regarding its Treasury management activities for the first 6 months of 18-19. The economic environment is uncertain, with issues such as Brexit negotiations making forecasting difficult. The projected interest receipts for 18-19 are on paragraph 4.6 on page 44, 315,500, which is approximately 45,000 above budget. This is also depicted in the chart on paragraph 4.8 on page 45. This increase is mostly owing to the rephasing of the capital programme and the increase in interest rates that were applied from August. Paragraph 4.9 actually needs a correction. So where it says 0.51 should say 0.92, which is what the council has received as an average rate on its investments. So this rate is higher than its long-term investments, but this reflects the average that the council gets when it spreads its investments by prioritising for secure and liquid investments, which attract a lower rate of interest. On page 45, table 4.10 shows a summary of the investments and returns for the first 6 months. And the council has seen an increase in its average return from 0.59 in 17-18 to 0.92 that we're currently seeing. Page 46, paragraph 4.13 shows the spread of the investments over different time periods and reflects that we're holding investments for shorter periods, but in a greater number of institutions. And then if you turn to page 47, paragraph 4.17 highlights our key performance indicators that are also shown in Appendix A on page 52, namely an underspend on capital, and financing cost to net revenue stream has improved, which is due to the increase in interest.
Just pause there before I go on to the commercial investment section. Has anyone got any questions more on the Treasury side?
Any questions on the Treasury? Yeah, Councillor McKinney.
Just on 412, could you just sort of expand on that? I mean, I'm aware of 106 agreements and the money is lodged with us and it's earning interest. As part of the agreement, interest has to be paid over once funds are realised. Just explain to me who they're released to.
Well, primarily it'll be things like, say, if it's to do with education, depends on the individual Section 106 agreement.
Yeah, what the item is.
Yeah, so it'll be, so for example, the council will say at a particular point in time, we need some monies towards a school or whatever.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. So it's released to the Education Authority?
Well, in that case, yeah, but it's not just education.
No, I understand. Yeah, I understand that. Housing, all sorts of things on. So that is actually being paid. They're being paid for the service.
We receive the Section 106, so effectively custodians.
And we invest it.
And obviously we invest that money.
Okay.
So it keeps the interest.
Sorry?
We keep the interest.
We have to pay it over.
Any other questions? Can we use our microphones, please? Otherwise we can't record.
How do you separate, let's say, Bingham Development has been going X amount of pounds and Eastleigh has been given X amount of pounds, there's the difference in interest. How do you split that up? Do you keep separate or do you just split it down the middle?
Yeah, no, we keep a separate record of it.
I have a question. At the training, and it's happened at every training we've had, Feroza focuses on telling us about, as councillors, we should be aware and understand the rating of the financial institutions that we're investing in. But I can't, maybe I've missed it, but I can't see that in the information we've got, how we understand the risk factors in relation to the rating of the institutions that the investments are made in. Is that information in the report? Have I missed it, or can we have it?
Well, I think you need to go, I suppose, going back to the basics of the first thing you approve at the start of the year is Treasury Management Strategy, and that contains, so in February you'll get that, you got it February just gone, and basically that sets the parameters that we invest in and our risk appetite. So that will say for certain banded institutions, we're allowed to invest this much. We then work to that strategy as officers. So the investments we're making at the moment are in accordance with those, whichever grouping they fall within. So we're operating within that strategy. And obviously we could, if you wanted, we could tell you what the ratings are, but if I'm frank, I'm not sure that's going to particularly help you in terms of any analysis of this, other than to say that internal audit, they review our treasury activity and they make sure as well that our investments are in accordance with our treasury management strategy.
I might come back on that in a moment. Councillor Purdy-Horan.
I don't think any of us in this council, not just this room, have any problems with the integrity of, and competence of our staff. But I know, to my own experience, there are people out there who are looking for anything to criticise councillors on. And I've recently, in another place, received an initial report from some investigator into the Northamptonshire debacle, and it basically, from memory, castigates both officers and councillors were too complacent in their duties. And I entirely take your point that we would know, or should know, that all we need to go is go back to the February, March meeting or whatever, and the Treasury strategy statement and all that. But members of the public, this is a public document, may not know that. And perhaps, if I may suggest, Mr. Chairman, an extra paragraph, obviously would have to be landscape, I suppose, an extra paragraph with AA, plus, minus, whatever, and all that, to just show transparently that we are dealing with the institutions that we've approved. That would do it.
An extra
column. Yeah, I think you've basically followed up with my follow-up. I was going to say that an extra column on this graph, on this chart. The other one that I think would be useful as well would be a pie chart with the spread of the percentage of investment in those institutions. So two things. So if you've got 80% in a AAA rated and then 10% in A rated, etc. Yeah. So if we could have an extra column and then a pie chart so that we can clearly see the distribution, and I think that that really is what I was going to say. Councillor Purdy-Horan's picked up the same view. Do we have any other questions on the?
Just to say, we'll look at doing that for the next time we report on this.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, sure. In fact, could we just have that as information
afterwards,
after this meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then obviously
I'll give you a revised table and chart.
Yeah, that's great. Do we have any other questions on Treasury Management? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. In view of the council's investments over recent months, which has been quite considerable in some areas, I'm not sure, but capital underspend of £12.1 million, presume is related, and I'm just wondering if you could give us an idea where the underspends have occurred.
Well, if you wait for the next item, which is revenue and capital update, we'll tell you what the capital underspend is.
I thought we were.
That's the next report, revenue and capital.
Any more questions on the investments? Then we'll move on to the next aspect of this report. Okay, we'll move on then. Thank you. Thank you.
So section 4.18 now we're on. So we've got commercial investments now. If you remember, when we did bring the Treasury Management Strategy. We did actually incorporate there's a section on commercial investments. In fact, I would say we were ahead of the game in terms of other councils, and that we put a lot more in there than others had who were waiting for SIT for guidance. We'd seen the draft SIT for guidance, and we were incorporating basically what was being recommended. So, in essence, the councils now have to show it's not just about financial investments; it's about what we're doing in terms of some of our asset investments, which are generating income, commonly known as commercial investments. And from section 4.18 onwards, that is what that covers. The other thing I'd mention is, if you remember as well, in the July meeting we talked about a reduction in property investment activity, particularly with concerns over particularly the retail market, but then there's obviously issues about knock-on effects in terms of other aspects of property. So the table, if I just talk about the table on page 40, I think it's 48, isn't it?
48,
We've got
yeah.
the same, just under paragraph 4.23. So this is effectively comparing to what we had in our original, the Treasury Management Strategies, what are we were planning. So the original column is, if you like, what we thought was going to happen. You can see there our commercial property income isn't quite as high as we anticipate, and that is because we haven't invested in as many properties and therefore got as much income. But what I will say is, as well, an important point to note, there's a figure there that says a net figure of £894,000. That is what's known as a contribution, we call a contribution to core functions, what you might call, if you like, a surplus based. When we take out our costs off our income, we've got effectively a surplus of £894,000, and that is therefore effectively going in to support other services. And that's really what that line means, and that's really, as a council, that's what we've tried to do when we set up the asset investment strategy. Its primary aim was to help generate income, to help support services and support the budget, and that's really what that does.
Yeah.
So that table is quite important. Critical though is risk, and if you remember what Fraser was talking about was the issue, the word proportionality. And what we're quite obviously keen on, we don't want to be putting, and I think I said at the meeting, not to put all our eggs in one basket, common phrase, and really the table, the pie charts on page 49 sort of demonstrates where our spread is. And I think I've said before that largely, historically, councils, when they've looked at investment property, it's been industrial sites. They've often been the main point of investment. And that's there not just for commerciality returns or commercial returns, but also there as regeneration and to support the communities and get businesses going. So it's not just about a complete focus on commercial returns, but also about economic regeneration. And that's really what those graphs show. I think moving on, has anyone got any questions on any of that?
Yes, please.
Councillor McKinnon.
Just on investment from commercial loans and the anticipated amount hasn't materialised. We come along to column 1, 2, 3 and you see that the actual is 54 rather than 108. Is that the cricket ground? Or
it's a cricket club loan, but the reason it's not materialised is because it's only for 6 months. So
it's just for 6 months.
Actual at 6 months. Projection is still 108, so we should get the full amount.
Okay. That answers that.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you. I'm conscious that to me it seems that the political wind is blowing against local authorities making commercial investments, particularly in property. I think that's something that came up at the Treasury Management training, something that's increasingly in the media. I make this, what I'm about to say now is not intended as a political point, it's intended as for the purposes of this meeting, but particularly in the event of a change of central government, I think that wind is likely to blow much stronger. So should we be planning for any changes that potentially could be retrospective about guidance or rules in relation to us investing commercially?
it's hard to speculate about changing politics, what that might mean, so I won't go down that particular route, but I will talk about just general principles. When we, in terms of our capital strategy and our treasury strategy, whatever we do is there's three principles we have to abide by. That's affordability, being prudent, and sustainability. And again, I think Fraser did touch on those at the training session. So I suppose what we're trying to do is we're trying to do slithers of things really, so that it covers us in that sort of event, any sort of eventuality. I think it'll be difficult for government to actually do anything retrospective now. Councils have actually invested in commercial property. I'd be amazed if they actually, you know, I think if we were in Spain or somewhere, that might happen, but I don't think it's necessarily going to happen in the UK. But one thing I will say is as well, in terms of that commercial agenda, obviously we haven't gone to anything like extremes that some councils have. Let's not forget we are the Commercial Council of the Year, of course, and, so we must be doing something right. But when we do what I call commercialism with a conscience, I think that's what I'd like to see the council doing. So it's doing things, making some money. We could probably make more, but then you're pushing the risk boundaries out. But for me, when I say we've had the decision about property, it's also we're mindful of some of the other things we're going to be doing, you know, like the crematorium and things you'll be seeing in the capital programme when it comes forward. There's Bingham Leisure Centres on the horizon, there's things like that. So we are conscious of our other capital demands and pressures, and so to a large extent we've and that's why I say we've reined back our commercial investments really, because we are aware of all those other issues, that pipeline of work.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, so recommendation that members note the capital and investment management update position as of September the 30th. Everyone in agreement to make that note? Excellent. We then, thank you very much, Peter. We then move on to item 9. The revenue and capital budget quarter 2. And that's Sarah.
Yeah. Sorry, Sarah's going to take. I just want to link it to really what Councillor Cooper said before, and just focus on the capital, just so you can, just so that's bottomed out. So, if you look at, I'm jumping into your slot. But Appendix C, you can see that landscape. You've got the various. I'm not sure what page it is actually.
I think it's 61, 60, 16, 61.
Oh, it's hard to see the pages because
page numbers on it.
Yeah,
it's the last appendix.
There are. It's just they're hidden.
Oh, hidden.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I'll have to
Page
think about that.
60 something.
Yeah.
62.
Yeah. So on page 62, there's a whole list of the capital programme. But what you'll see there's a variance column. So the variance is the underspend position that we were talking about. That £12 million, which is shown on page 60. 5, 4, something like that.
65.
Yeah, 65.
So you can see there's the variance there right at the bottom. So that large figure of £12 million, I think you quoted in that last report, well, which shows if nothing else the reports are joined up. But the main variance is you can see the asset investment strategy. You see there's a variance of 8.2 million, reflecting again what we said about the slowdown and in terms of what we're doing on assets.
Mentioned in the report as well, 1.3. Okay, so we'll hand over to Sarah. Sorry.
Shortened it a bit now. So revenue and capital quarter 2 report. On page 55, the report begins. There's little movement from the last report that was taken. So on Appendix A on page 59. I've lost my pages now. 59 shows the summary revenue outturn position, which shows an overall adverse variance of £80,000, which is owing mostly to business rates position, but there is still expected to be 1.174 contribution to reserves at the end of the year. Paragraph 1.3 on the same page details the capital underspend that was previously mentioned of 12 million and is detailed on Appendix C, which you've just been referred to, mostly owing to the general slowdown in asset investment and the depot. On paragraph 4.1 identifies that of the 80,000 projected overspend, 20,000 is attributable to revenue services, with material variances above 15k on Appendix B on pages 60 and 61. There's a total positive variance of 596,000, and most of this is planning income, garden waste, and the transfer to the Lex contract. Adverse variances totalling 616,000, with planning appeals, rising costs of diesel, streetwise contract, and the hold on property investment resulting in lower rental income. The council has also received additional grant for business rates and individual electoral registration of 73,000. This offsets the projected variance on revenue. However, the business rates variation more than offsets this. But overall, it's a positive position to report that there are external pressures and uncertainties that may impact on this position by the end of the year.
Thank you very much. Councillor McInnes.
Thank you. I'm on page 60 and 61, and I'll just go down my observations in terms of planning and legal costs. Payments made out, are those payments applicable to the costs of appeals and costs of okay? I mean, I know we work at trying to actually minimise that because it's an amount of money that we could well use. On the fly tipping, I'm on Streetwise, where we've had to pay extra because of fly tipping. I know people are working on that too, but perhaps we need to actually make a saving here, is to actually undertake more, whatever the word is, to actually cut that at the root rather than later on.
Well, I'm guessing it's been raised at PMB.
It was, I can comment.
Right.
It was raised at PMB, so I can comment on it as I
Okay.
attended that meeting, and I'm not sure if I asked the question, but the question was asked.
Yeah.
What can we do to combat the prevalence of fly tipping? And it's a very, I'm only now repeating what we learnt on the night. It's a very difficult area to prosecute people, and it's a very difficult area to reduce, because as the environmental officer reported, that to get a successful prosecution you need evidence, which means you've got to see somebody doing it, or you've got to have recorded them on a hidden camera or a dash cam, or so on and so forth. And I think there's only 2 prosecutions last year. Was it Councillor Walker? If I remember right, there was 2.
Well, I think they've had 2 this year that they're pleased about. But yes, definitely, I think the message that I took away was that, well, or thought at the time was, just because a crime's difficult to prove doesn't mean you shouldn't be trying to.
That's right.
Bring prosecution. So that was, I think, that as far as I was concerned, that was the message, that was the action that was taken away.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
Councillor Walker did speak to the matter in that context. Yeah, Councillor Brown.
I'd like to say that Hungry Lane at Sutton Mornington, Normanton-on-Soar area, where we had quite a lot of fly tipping, there's the sign there that said CCTV operation is in progress. Whether it is or not, I don't know. The fly tipping is dramatically decreased. Whether it's just the sign that's done it.
Yeah.
Maybe we should put more signs up saying that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, did you want to ask
Okay,
the
yeah.
question?
The next one's about leisure management and the electricity costs. Are they shared costs, and are they shared on a proportion, or are they metered? I'm assuming there that,
No,
that
they're all separately.
so they got so it's our part of the
Yes.
arena,
Yeah.
the office part.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Investment property services, yeah, we've covered that about the 142. Service manager. Oh yeah, on the next page, corporate governance service manager, vacant post. Is the post being advertised and filled? I mean, it doesn't say the post has been deleted. It just says it's.
No, it's being used as a saving, so that will be a saving on the budget.
So it's
As
a
you would
saving on the budget,
as you
but
would
is it being
expect.
deleted?
Yeah, it will be deleted. Yeah.
Yeah, it will be deleted. That.
Deleted.
So.
Redundant, don't you mean?
It's what's known as getting more out of your employees, I think. You know.
Getting more out. The ones we've
Existing
got.
I think we mean that has the post been made redundant?
It has, yeah.
Yes, I think.
Yeah,
but
delete,
I think
the post would be deleted
Yeah.
if it was vacant and
The
going to be.
the post has been removed from the establishment.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I think we need to be very clear what we're saying sometimes. Remember this is being this is for the public. They can hear this, so I think it's important that we get the right terminology. So yes, okay. Any further questions on that, Councillor McInnes?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Lawrence.
Can I just come back on the fly tipping issue? I've got a number of hotspots in my ward I know are costing us a lot of money. One, how much is the increase in the cost of the contract to cover fly tipping? And can you tell me just how much we spend on fly tipping? Or rather, collecting fly tipping?
150 grand.
I haven't got the information to hand now, but I can find out for you what that is. Yeah.
I might have to look at the agenda for Tuesday, so give me a minute, I'll see what information we've got.
Okay. Do we have any other Councillor Cooper?
Thank you. In the meantime, question about fly tipping. Regarding adverse variations. In the event that a court would award costs in favour of Streetwise, would those costs be set against the cost of adverse variations?
No, we have to always gross up our costs and our income, so it will go in as an income line for Streetwise, not as a netted off cost.
So, at the end of the day, is that question the answer yes? The way it's revenue and cost balance?
It goes as an income stream on the other side for Streetwise, so they'll have the costs on one side and then they'll have the income on the
I
other.
understand that, but does that show a benefit to the borough?
Well, it'll be a benefit to the Streetwise contract if it's their cost.
So, yeah, but what I'm saying is, we're obviously having to pay further. It's costing us more to actually, for them to do extra work to sort out the fly tipping. So we're paying them extra for that anyway, but on the other side of the coin, if a court rules in favour of Streetwise and awards costs, is that set against what it's cost us in extra payments to Streetwise?
It'll be netted off it'll come off the prime contract. It'll be part of the prime contract cost.
Oh, okay. What you mean for the
Streetwise?
For the next succeeding year or something?
No, it's part of the in-year cost for Streetwise.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could comment on that actually. The court would only, what would happen is if someone was prosecuted for fly tipping, it's a criminal offence, and the Crown prosecution would have to apply for compensation costs. So the court costs would go to the court, but Streetwise, let's say, would say it's cost us £20,000 to clean it up. So we want compensation, so there'd have to be a claim for compensation. So yeah, I just want to clarify. So if compensation was awarded, would that come back to Rushcliffe and then be knocked off that figure, which I think is what your question is, isn't it? Yeah.
Shall I? I'll come back to you just to make sure I've got the definitive answer.
We get. Oh, that's an action for next time for clarification. Councillor Walker.
I've got some of this data for you. It's numerical data rather than financial. So this year, the number of reports of fly tips is at 535, which is 239 more than this time last year. I don't know how that translates into the costs, but you know, you don't have to be a mathematical genius to work out the increase.
So clearly, thank you, Councillor. Clearly, it's increased. So it might be useful for us to have an action on that, just so that we can see the difference in cost between last year and this year's financial costs on that. Do we have any other questions? No other questions? So we've got that action. Great. Okay, so the recommendation outlined on page 55. It's recommended that the corporate governance group forward the report to the cabinet for approval, noting item A and item B. I won't read them out. The variation and the underspend. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And we now move on to item 10, which is the work programme on page 66 to 67, sorry, on your version. It's the quick view of the work programme. Any comments on the work programme? Any additions, changes, or are we happy with the next?
Just add a couple.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So just a couple of amendments. So where it says Treasury Management Strategy,
yeah,
that is now Capital Investment Strategy.
Okay.
The external audit plan, possibly the internal audit strategy. I need to check with internal auditors, but if we could move them for now, we'll be expecting those to come in February, before the start of the financial year.
Right. So the internal audit progress reports quarter 3 will be on.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. So on 9th of May 2019, I'm looking. You've got the external audit plan, 2019-20. That's should be going to the February meeting.
Yeah.
And the internal audit strategy, which is the 4th bullet point down on the 9th of May.
Yeah.
That should also be going to the February meeting.
Right, okay, so that'll make it quite a busy meeting, but nevertheless, that's fine. Okay, so no problems with that. We'll get an update on that as we progress towards February. It's been a lively meeting, a useful meeting, I think. Some very good points. Thanks for your participation, everybody. And Merry Christmas as it arrives.
Where's the mince pies?
I haven't brought any mince pies. Oh,
shocking.
Shocking, that's bad behaviour. Thanks, everyone.